So, welcome you guys. So Joe, I consider you a friend. We didn't go have dinner or lunch or anything this time, but maybe next time. Joe's been to our groups several times. He was our guest speaker last year during COVID via Zoom. And he's been our guest speaker even before that. And we've known each other for what, 3 or 4, 5 years? 5 years. Okay. So the funny thing how we met was you had some investors that had pulled money together and you guys were lending money to some of the commercial projects, was it, that were going on?
We're raising money to build right behind Cabela's. There's a big development there.
Okay. So that's what it was. So then I met some of your investors and yeah. So anyway, that was really cool. So Joe is an investment counselor for a national real estate investment firm and the author of Real Estate Due Diligence, the investor's guide to avoiding costly mistakes. As an investment counselor, he advises clients on how to build portfolios of single family homes to achieve financial goals like retirement and diversification from the stock market. His background includes almost 20 years of experience as a real estate investor and educator. He holds an MBA in finance from Columbia University Business School and formerly served as an officer in the U.S. Marine Corps. He's not related to the former manager of the New York Yankees. I love that. So without further ado, Joe, I'm going to bring your presentation's already up. If you don't mind coming on up here and
Thank you.
Getting started. Thank you for coming.
Let's see if I can see this. Thank you, Ginger. As Ginger said, I work for a company in the Bay Area, and we identify good markets around the country and offer them to investors. Most of our investors are in the Bay Area or California in general. And as you know, California is not a great place to invest. Prices are too high, rents are too low, there's too much rent control, all that. So what we do is advise people where they can invest in other parts of the country. We always tell them, do your due diligence, but we never tell them how to do it. So I went on Amazon to see if I could find a good book that I could recommend to people. And I was surprised no one had ever written a book on how to do due diligence for real estate investing. So COVID was happening and I was sheltering in place. I couldn't travel. Business was slow. So I thought I'd just write one. So I wrote it and I found out why no one had ever written one. It's a ton of work and you don't make any money. So it should have been a clue when I found out nobody had written one. Anyway, so I wrote it, and what we're going to cover today is just a few points from the book, but it's just generic. How do you approach doing your due diligence for investments? The case study we're going to walk through is a single family home, but the same thought process applies to multifamilies. I hear a lot of interest in multifamilies. See if I can get this to work. Okay, so we'll talk about due diligence process in general, and then we're going to focus on 3 areas, which is how to choose a market to invest in, how to choose a neighborhood, and if you get a property from a provider, whether it's a turnkey provider or a realtor in Atlanta or wherever you're thinking of buying, how do you know what kind of neighborhood you're buying in? Is this something place where you want to own? You can do that remotely, and then go through a pro forma. Usually they give you a pro forma that says, if you buy this property, here's what your rent will be, and here's how much principal, interest, taxes, insurance, property management is going to cost you, and here's all the money you'll make. So how do you sanity check that if it's an area you don't even know if what you're being told is realistic? If you can do those 3 things, you're in pretty good shape. And then just recap. All right, so like I said, due diligence is going to cover a lot of different areas: markets, property management, finding tenants, evaluating neighborhoods, choosing properties, financing, inspections, insurance. You could probably write a book on each one of these topics. But the good news is that most of the work is already done for you. The people who are providing you with property, they can give you a lot of information about the property. Your property management company can help you find the tenants. The bank, the lender, will help navigate you through the loan process so you know what to do there. 3 areas where you really need to focus, where you're not going to get a whole lot of help, are markets, neighborhoods, and pro forma. The thing about markets is every realtor is going to tell you that their market is the best. So you talk to the guy in
I do
Tampa.
not.
I looked at you and I said, person in Reno will say Reno's the best place to invest. The person in Atlanta will say Atlanta's the best place to invest. And they all have a story. They all have a good story as to why it's a good place to invest and why you want to be there. So at the end of the day, you're going to have to decide on your own, what are the pros and cons of all the different markets and which one you want to invest in. No one can make that decision for you. And the same thing with neighborhoods. When you get a property listing, you want to be able to research it. You could always fly out there and look and get a feel for the neighborhood, but that gets very expensive. Especially during COVID, people didn't want to travel at all, but they still needed to invest. How do you remotely tell where's a good place to invest in whatever city you're looking at? Even without COVID, if you had 5 markets you were considering, it's still very costly to fly out there. If you could do some desktop research and eliminate 3 of the 5 and just narrow it down to a short list of 2, you save yourself a lot of time and energy and money. And then you can maybe fly out to see those 2. And we'll talk about that. And then the pro forma financial statement, like I said. All right, markets. Every market has a story and every realtor will tell you why their market's the best. But as far as how to select, a lot of it depends on your goal. These are some of the markets that we're in. They're mostly in the Southeast, but there are some also in the Midwest. The ones in the Midwest are very low price markets. You can buy a house for $125K that rents for $1,100 a month. They cash flow really well, but they'll never appreciate. Population's flat. There's not a whole lot of growth, job growth, or population growth. The ones in the Sun Belt, they're growing like crazy, kind of like Reno. So there's a lot of appreciation, but not as much cash flow. So you have to decide what your primary goal is. So what we look for and what you should be looking for is job growth, population growth, a diverse economy, a landlord-friendly state. So the landlord tenant laws favor the landlord. So if you have to evict somebody, you don't have to, won't have a whole lot of problem doing that. California is terrible that way. Other states are very, very friendly to the landlord. Positive cash flow and good teams. So I separate job growth and population growth because some places are out of sync. Like Florida has a large retiree population. 10,000 baby boomers are retiring every day, and a lot of them move to Florida. So if you track job growth, it doesn't look that great. I mean, it's good, but population growth is much faster than the job growth because retirees don't need jobs. So they're moving there and not bringing jobs, but they're also, the population is still growing. And that increases the demand for housing. Diverse economy, you don't want a place like Detroit that has one industry. So when that industry is in the toilet, the local economy is suffering. Atlanta is the exact opposite. It has probably the most diverse economy in the country. If you look at the top employers in Atlanta, like no 2 are in the same industry. Coca-Cola's there, CNN's there, UPS, the Center for Disease Control, Home Depot, so very diverse. So Delta Airlines, for example, is having trouble right now because of COVID, but other parts of the economy can take up the slack. So that's what you want to see, a resilient economy. And they all have pros and cons, like I said. So I like to taxonomize markets by appreciation and cash flow. So on the y-axis, you see here appreciation, and on the x-axis, cash flow. So some markets like San Francisco or New York or Seattle, they have a huge amount of appreciation potential, but negative cash flow because the prices are so high relative to what they were rent for that it will be negative $500 a month. And a lot of people in 2008 got in trouble because they invested because they thought the prices would keep going up, and they had a negative $500 a month on each property, and then they lost their job or something happened, and then they got caught and squeezed. I would probably put Reno in that corner, in that quadrant at this point, sounds like. At the other end of the spectrum, those markets, like I was mentioning in the Midwest or Birmingham, Alabama, those kind of places where you can buy properties very inexpensively. There's not a whole lot of growth, but you can get a lot of cash flow. So that's a second approach that you can take. And then there are markets that are kind of in the middle. Atlanta, Charlotte, Huntsville, the coastal cities around Florida, Dallas, those areas. They have less cash flow than the bottom markets, but they're still breaking even or positive, maybe 150, 200 a month. So you don't have to feed it every month with negative cash flow, and you're basically hoping to break even and wait for it to appreciate. So that's kind of like the sweet spot for most investors. You can have a little bit of both cash flow and appreciation. Now, how you decide what you want kind of depends on where you are in your investing career and what your goals are. If you're young and starting out, say 45 or younger, and you have many, many decades before you're going to be able to retire, appreciation is usually where you'll make most of your money because the property will go up, over time. You can buy a house in Florida now for $250, brand new construction, 4-bedroom, 2-bath for $250. 10 years from now, that'll be worth $350. I have what I call a 10-10 plan. You buy 10 houses in Florida and wait 10 years. And your net worth will go up by $1 million. So it's with the population growth, Florida's population is growing by 320,000 a year. That's basically 100,000 households a year, and they can't build fast enough. And that's going to continue. So you invest for appreciation, so you can build your net worth and your equity over time, and then set yourself up for when you eventually retire. On the other hand, if you're like 65, then you don't want appreciation 10 years from now. You need cash flow right now to replace the income from your day job, so you can live off it. So that's the time where you might sell your house in California or Manhattan and then buy 10 houses in one of these cash flow markets and get $6,000-7,000 a month positive cash flow and use that to fund your retirement. So a lot of where you choose to invest depends on where you are and what your primary goal is. Other considerations, property type. I hear a lot of interest in multifamilies. Some markets, multifamilies work really well. Duplexes, fourplexes and above. Other markets, they don't work at all. They're in the wrong neighborhood. They're old, and like Indianapolis, they're in the city, center of the city, and it's very old stock, and you have constant maintenance expenses. Now, other parts of the country, duplexes and fourplexes work great. Inventory availability, that's a big problem. Right now, everything is selling very quickly. It's hard to get inventory. Some markets, like our Florida markets, are out. You have to wait 6 to 12 months to get inventory. So if you're doing a 1031 exchange, for example, and you need 5 houses, you need to focus on markets that have tons of inventory. If you need 5, you don't want to look at 5, right? You want to look at 10 or 15 so you can pick the best 5. So certain markets like Dallas have tons of inventory, and also multifamilies, which can absorb a lot of that 1031 money. And then weather. Some people, no matter what you say, they won't invest in Florida because of hurricanes. Some people won't invest in California because of earthquakes. That's not really weather, but same kind of thing, environmental concerns. So is anybody here concerned about sea levels rising, climate change, anything like that? You are? Yeah. Okay, let's see if I can get this technology to work here. I'll show you what website. Where is it?
That one. The blue. There you go.
Yeah, it's NOAA's, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Association. Administration, yeah. They have this website here. And if you click on it, where's the tab?
Here, let me get rid of that.
You get here, then you get here. And so here you get a map of the US. So I'm just going to pick a coastal city like San Francisco. And here's a map of the Bay Area. And you see on this y-axis, they have feet, like if sea levels rise 1 feet, 2 feet, 3 feet, what's going to happen? So you can see what happens when you drag this up, what areas are going to be underwater. See that? Where are we now? 8 feet.
8 feet.
Wow. So let's see, let's go down to 6. So you see, like San Francisco is not too bad. San Francisco is very hilly. It's a high elevation, so it's not too bad. But the San Francisco airport, let's see if I can get this. The airport is completely underwater. And Foster City, which is built on a landfill, is also completely underwater. So if you were thinking about investing in Foster City, you'd have to think twice. See? So what you do then, so when's that going to happen? Click on this button. Oops, wrong one. This button. Where does it say sea level rise viewer scenario? That one. Local scenarios. And click on this. And according to their models, sea levels are going to rise. Let's see, 6 feet. By the year 2050. or so. So it'll tell you based on their models, how much time you have. So if you're thinking of buying something and selling it in 5 or 10 years, it might be okay. But if you plan to hold it for a long time, then you might take a second look at that. Generally, our properties in the coastal areas, we don't have this problem. Because you think about it, beachfront property is really expensive. It costs millions of dollars and it's not going to cash flow. Most investors don't touch it. Most of our properties will be further inland. But we do have some properties that are short-term rentals like Airbnbs that are right near the coast. And for those, we watch out for that to make sure that we're not buying someplace that we're going to have a bad surprise. All right, let's see if I can close this now. All right, back to this. So much for weather. So these are all considerations and you decide what kind of market you're interested in. So you might be considering multiple ones and eliminate some for whatever reason, and then keep the ones that you're interested in. The next thing is neighborhoods. So I'm using as a case study this property. I actually own this property. I changed the address, but this is what I got. And this was a pro forma financial statement I was given at the time. And how do I know about Ocala, Florida? I've never been there, So here's some things you can do. There's a website, niche.com, niche.com, and it gives you a lot of demographic information on the market. You can type in the address of the property, or you can type in the zip code. For brand new construction homes, sometimes the address doesn't exist yet. It's not in the system, so you just type in the zip code. So what I like about Ocala is that it's right near this place called the Villages. The Villages is the largest job growth and population growth in this specific area. Is that working? And if you look on the map, you can see it's right there, I-75, which is good, and it's near the jobs. So far, I like it. It gives you a report. This ranks it on B neighborhood. We're all familiar with A, B, C, D neighborhoods. Everybody's got their own definition, and a lot of people in C neighborhoods will claim their neighborhood's B. So there's some confusion about that. So it's good to have an objective third party who evaluates neighborhoods and tells you what they see. So they got good schools, housing, families, jobs, all that sort of thing. Since it's near the retirement center, I'm not surprised it doesn't rank high in nightlife or health clubs. But overall, it's a very good neighborhood. So A neighborhoods are typically the affluent ones, just for definitions. That's where the doctors and the lawyers live, and it's typically they're too expensive to cash flow. B neighborhoods are mostly homeowners, people like nurses, school teachers, police officers, firefighters, those kind of people. And most people in the neighborhood own their own home, and that's significant. The C neighborhood is more of a tenant neighborhood with multifamilies, apartments, that sort of thing. And then D neighborhoods are war zones. You don't want to even touch those. That's where you have graffiti and boarded up houses and drive-by shootings and drug dealers on the corner. So most investors invest in B or C neighborhoods. I prefer B myself. Some more stats. They talk about the real estate. Here's a significant metric that I follow, and that is what percent of the people in this area own their own home versus rent. And you can see that it's a 71% ownership and 29% renters. And I think that's significant because if people own their own home, they take care of their property. They have pride of ownership. They mow the lawns. They don't let junk pile up. Renters don't care about the house as much as you would as an owner. And so those neighborhoods tend to deteriorate faster. And then, so you protect your property values by investing in a neighborhood with mostly owners. And then the second thing is exit strategy. If you go to sell a house and you're in a primarily homeowner neighborhood, you have multiple exit strategies. You can sell to your tenant, you can sell to another investor, or you can sell to a homeowner. But if you're in a tenant neighborhood where everybody's a renter, you basically have one option, and that is to sell to another investor. And typically investors are going to try and drive a hard bargain. For them, it's not an emotional decision to buy a home. It's just dollars and cents. So I track that. I like to see a 2-to-1 ratio of owners to renters personally as part of my screening criteria. But you can use whatever you want. What other stats? Residence, household income, education level. You can see it's not a high neighborhood, but that's why there's a lot of renters. Education level is a bell-shaped curve. It tends to peak around 2-year degrees. Oh, the other market up at the top, it says A based on ethnic diversity. So I went to another website that I look at. That's city-data.com. And city-data has a lot of stats. It's not as polished and clean as niche.com. It's just a raw dump of economic data from various sources, but it has a lot of good information there. And you can see the ethnic breakdown of that zip code, 58% white, 20% black, 16% Hispanic, and so forth. And that's good because it gives you a wide tenant pool to recruit tenants from. Whenever you have a vacancy, you want to fill a vacancy, just about anybody can live in this neighborhood. I remember 2015, I was in the south end of San Antonio and I was driving around looking at properties. And I felt like I was in Mexico because all the signs were in Spanish, all the restaurants were Mexican restaurants. There's a guy with a little cart with the shaved water ice thing, so if I own a property there and I have a vacancy and I advertise for it, no white guy's going to apply, no black guy's going to apply, no Asian guy's going to apply, most likely, because that neighborhood was just monolithic. There's only one kind of person that wants to live there, would fit there. This kind of neighborhood, everybody can live there. So you cast a wide net whenever you have a vacancy. So that's one thing I like to see. Oh, crime. So go to this site, spotcrime.com. There are several out there. And I took a look at the different crimes that are committed. The one that has a fist, that shows that there was a fight. Somebody had to be broken up. They have, here's the one for Reno. Let me just fast forward to that. So you can see Reno seems to have a lot of crime. It's got some fists. You see the cans of spray paint. That means vandalism. Somebody spray painted something. Handcuffs, that means there was an arrest. And the red dot with the bullseye, that was a shooting. So these are the kinds of things you want to look at. If you look at this, you might freak out and say, oh, I don't want to live in Reno, but all of you live in Reno. And it's not that bad. It's not as bad as it looks. So you just have to take these sites with a grain of salt, just be careful not to get too freaked out about it. The thing to watch out for is violent crime. It's bad enough if there's vandalism, like somebody spray paints something, or there's graffiti, or somebody breaks into a car. But when there's muggings, armed robbery, that sort of thing, their tenants are going to leave. They'll break the lease and just take off, especially if they have kids. So you don't want to be anywhere that, but those are mostly D neighborhoods. If you're buying in A and B neighborhoods, you don't even need this step. If you're buying in a C neighborhood, I would take a look to make sure that it's not marginal. By the way, this one, there was one shooting that gave me a little bit of pause. So if you click on the site, it'll give you the details. And it turned out this guy, his wife was cheating on him and he shot the guy at work. So it looked like a one-off, not like an ongoing gang feud or anything like that. So I thought this is okay. You can decide for yourself. Okay, so based on my armchair analysis so far, I think this property is looking pretty good. It's a solid B neighborhood. It's near the freeway and jobs. High percentage of homeowners, diverse tenant pool, manageable crime levels, and the area just looks good. So if I was looking at multiple properties, multiple markets, this might be the one that I would consider going to and actually taking a trip to go out there. So on a tour, you can take a live tour where you fly out and actually drive around, look at the neighborhoods, and get a feel for the area. During COVID, we were doing what's called virtual tours because people didn't want to fly or couldn't fly. So the property manager would go through the property room by room, say, here's the pictures we use, here's the cabinets, here's the kind of floor tiles we use, water heater, everything, very detailed. We tell them, just pretend the investor is right there or that the tenant's right there. How would you showcase this house? And they walk through with a camera and send you a link to the video. We also recommend you video up and down the street so you can see what kind of neighborhood it is. You want to see that there are nice neighborhoods, mowed lawns, people have pride of ownership, nice cars, no clunkers, that sort of thing. So by doing that, you can evaluate a neighborhood remotely. You don't even need to fly out there. When you go out there, you find out that it usually works. Oh, a final tip. When I buy a new property, what I do every time, I take screenshots of these different sites and I save them in Word docs and I save them in my folder for that property. So 5-10 years from now, when I'm considering my exit strategy, I can see what the stats look like then. And then I compare it, how does this compare to when I first bought the property? Is the neighborhood getting better? Is household income going up? More homeowners? Or is the area starting to go downhill? Is crime going up? That sort of thing. So there's no way 10 years from now, I'm going to remember what the neighborhood looked like when I bought it. So by taking screenshots of these sites and saving them, I have like a baseline that I can use for future comparison. And that helps inform my exit strategy down the road. All right, pro forma. This is what I was told. The house costs 160, 20% down, some closing costs. It's going to rent for $1,350, principal, interest, taxes, insurance, property management, total expenses, monthly cash flow, $400 a month, almost $5,000 a year, and a cash on cash return for the first year of 13.4%. So how do I know if I can believe this or not?
You
So
can't. There's no expenses.
There's no expenses.
There's no repairs.
Well,
There's no maintenance.
Well, very good. We'll talk about that. So we're going to go line by line and just go through the thought process. So the rent, $1,350 a month. The way to find that out is just go to any of the rental sites like Zillow or Trulia, type in the zip code and type in houses, look for houses, filter on houses that are similar to this one, like they say number of bedrooms, baths, square footage, that sort of thing. When I did that, here's what I came up with. There were 10 houses for rent in that area. The rents ranged from $1,300 to $1,975, so that was quite a range. So the $1,350 seemed reasonable. And the other thing you want to look at is how much competition do you have? On the map here, you can see there's 10 other properties in that zip code for rent, and they're kind of spread out. You don't want a whole lot of other rentals because that's who you're competing with for tenants. The first house I bought, an investment property, was in 2004 in Phoenix. And when I went there to visit, it was a new subdivision, and it looked like every other house had a for rent sign in front of it. And that just ruins your day because now you have competition. How am I going to find a tenant? You have to lowball your rents. So by looking at these kind of sites, you can see how much competition you have and are the rents realistic. The property manager recommended we go out at $1,400. I said, no, according to my analysis, we should do $1,350. And the next day she emailed me back, says, I got an application for $1,400. You want me to reject it? So that's when you shut up, But by going through this, I had a pretty good idea what made sense. Yes, sir.
When you're looking at this, do you take time to look at the finishes on the inside compared to the prospective property?
Yeah, you look around, see, if your property is really basic with laminate counters, and these places, like the 1950 one probably has granite countertops and stainless appliances and upscale. So you look at that as well. If yours is out of whack, let's say they priced it at $2,000 a month. You say, wow, that's kind of high. Why would this one go for $2,000 when everything else here is going for less? Then you compare how the finishes are and the other ones. Maybe there's a reason why yours should be more, but I'd be very skeptical. So that's one thing you certainly look at. All right, next line, vacancy and maintenance. There was no for a lot of providers don't put that in there, so you got to add it. Don't wait for them to do it. So I talked to the property management company. They said that on average the tenants stay 30 months, 2.5 years. So 30 months of occupancy, 1 month of vacancy while they're doing the make ready and advertising it. So for every 31-month period, there's 1 month of vacancy. That comes out to, what was it, 3% vacancy rate. So I allocated $50 a month for vacancy as a negative. And then the same thing for maintenance. This is a brand new house, so there shouldn't have any maintenance. It's brand new and everything's still under builder warranty. So if anything goes wrong, the builder has to fix it for free. But if you're buying a renovated home, let's say a home built in the 70s or the 80s that's been renovated, you should definitely have a high amount of maintenance expense in there, 1% per year. So if $100,000 house, figure $1,000 a month, comes to maybe $80. No, $1,000 a year. I'm sorry, that's 80 something a month. That might be a good place to start. Some of the homes we have in Cleveland are 100 years old, and they have a lot of maintenance, and our investors get nickel and dime every month with maintenance expenses. So you want to budget more than that. So I like sticking new homes. By the way, if you buy a brand new home, should you get an inspection?
Yeah.
Who would get an inspection? Who would not get an inspection? You wouldn't?
You're brand new?
It's brand new, right? You would think that, but it still pays to get an inspection. The home builder usually has subcontractors that they, the plumbing subcontractor, the drywall guy, and they use different ones throughout the development, and they're not always consistent in how they put their house together. Sometimes they're rushed. They have to finish out the development by a certain time, and once the houses that are built towards the end get rushed and they take shortcuts. So you want to find that stuff out soon. I actually do 2 inspections, not just one. I like to do the inspection before I buy it, and then right around before the 2-year mark, I consider doing a second one. I want to see, maybe the ground is shifted and there's a crack in the slab or there's a crack in the wall or something. If I identify it before the warranty expires, I can get the builder to fix it for free. So around the 18-20 month mark, I talk to my tenant. I say, have you noticed anything with the house? Or the doors not opening because something's settled, or are there cracks or anything like that? If they say no, then fine, I don't need the second inspection. But if they do, then it might be worth $300 to have an inspection and get the home builder to build it for free, fix it for free. All right, principal and interest, that was based on a 20-year, 20% down, 30-year fixed. If you put 25% down, you can often get a lower interest rate. So that's something you should talk to your lender about and run the numbers and see if it makes sense. Typically, the longer you hold the property, the more advantageous it is to have a lower interest rate. So if you're planning on buying hold for 30 years, you might want to go for the lower interest rate. If you're planning on selling it within 5 years, probably not. So that's just something to consider. Closing costs, the lender gives you an estimate of closing costs, but sometimes the home builder will have a preferred lender. And if you use their lender, they'll give you the closing costs for free or take a couple $1,000s off. So you can compare what's on the home, pro forma and compare it to what your lender's charging and make an adjustment as needed. All right, and then property taxes. The property taxes on this one were $200 a month, which comes out to about 1.5%, which is about right for the area. Some pitfalls with new homes, like in Texas, the first year's property taxes is based on the land value only, not the improvements. And then in the second year, the improvements kick in, and in Texas, property taxes are really high. So you have to make sure that the pro forma is based on what it's going to be in the second year, not the first year. Otherwise, you'll have a bad mistake, a surprise. And then same thing with renovated homes. Let's say a home builder buys a house for $80,000, they put $20,000 worth of renovations in it, and they sell it to you for $120,000. The property taxes are often stated at the $80,000 value, which is what the property taxes were when they bought it, not what your property taxes are going to be at the improved price. So if you're buying a renovated home, you want to double check the property taxes. You can go to the tax assessor's office website, figure out how they calculate it, or whoever's providing you the property, ask them to double check and make sure so you don't get a bad surprise. That makes sense. Markets to watch out for. Texas has high property taxes. Everybody has a ranch in Texas, so that's how the state raises money through property tax. There's no state income tax, but they have high property taxes. Cleveland, there's a lot of suburbs outside of Cleveland, and the property taxes vary wildly from suburb to suburb. So the pro formas are sometimes based on averages. So you just have to make sure that if you're buying something, that it's the right number for your area. And then Alabama, where I own 4 properties, that has the second lowest property tax rates in the country, which I like. So I get to keep more of my rents. What else? Insurance. The insurance in the pro forma is low, but it is accurate. Modern homes in Florida are designed to withstand hurricanes, so they have to be able to stand 230-mile-an-hour winds or something like that. Double pane windows, solid brick construction, really sturdy roofs. The irony is, if you bought a 50-year-old house in Florida, the insurance would be 2 or 3 times as much. But the brand new ones are actually pretty inexpensive. And then the insurance is what's required by the lender. You might choose to have more insurance just to cover yourself. So here's another site, floodfactor.com. A lot of the FEMA data about floods is kind of outdated. If you want a second opinion, go to floodfactor.com, type in the address, and it'll give you an assessment of how much risk you're taking by buying a property in this area. Realtor.com standardized on flood factor. That's where they're getting their data now. So for floods instead of FEMA. And they've done a hell of a lot more real research on it than I'll ever be able to do. So I'll just go with what they're saying. You might also want to have an umbrella policy in case you get sued, or something like that. So you might add that to your insurance costs. Ask your agent for a quote. Usually it's not that much. $1 million policy is usually $200 a year or something like that. So you might want to add that. And then property management is usually a percentage of rents, 8%, 10%, something like that. So here's our adjustments. The first column is the original pro forma. The second column are the adjustments that I made after doing my due diligence. We put more money down for the down payment. The closing costs, we saved some money. Vacancy reserve, that's a negative for cash flow because you're setting aside vacancy amount. Principal and interest, we save some money because we have a smaller loan amount and a lower interest rate. Insurance is a little more. What else? Maintenance, we have a reserve for. So after all the adjustments, you can see the final. Here's our revisions as to what the property performance is going to look like. And you can see the ROI went from 13.4% down to 10.3. So does that mean you shouldn't buy it? No, it's still a good investment. It still works, but you did a sanity check on the numbers and you're kind of confident. So you can go out and buy the property because you did your due diligence. Yeah. All right, that's the other thing. This sounds like a lot of work, but it's really not that bad. You don't feel you need to be an economist or a CPA to buy a house. All of you bought houses. When you go through the pro forma line by line, after you've done a couple of them, they go pretty quickly. And usually if you're working with one provider in one market, this guy always exaggerates the rent. I'm just going to take the rent down $100 a month. That's just what they do, So you can usually do a few of these in 15 minutes or 10 minutes. You should focus on the big ticket items, rents, property taxes, and maintenance, because that's where I see investors get bad surprises. But even if the rent, like if you imagine if you were raising rents every year when the lease renews for $25 a month, if your rent projection is $100 off, it's going to take you 4 years to get the rent where it was supposed to be on day one. So you want to, have a sanity check on the rent projection to make sure that's realistic. Same thing with taxes and maintenance. And another thing is houses are moving very quickly in this market. So you want to reserve the property first and then do your due diligence. If you see a property that looks promising, say, hold that for me for 24 hours while I crunch my numbers. And then an hour later, you can get back to them, and tell them if you're interested or not interested. What I see investors doing is they said, oh, let me look at this. This looks interesting. They do the due diligence. And then when they get back to the agent, the property's already gone. That's just the nature of the market we're in right now. So try to reserve it first if you can, and then do your due diligence. Is there a question?
Do you ever buy for me, one of them is if they're under a lease or if they're month to month.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that would be more if it was already not a new construction, but
right, you're taking over an existing property. Yeah, if they have a lease, how much time is left on the lease, and what's the tenant's payment history been? All that stuff, you certainly take that into account. You might be inheriting a headache. All right, so let's recap. Markets, you want to decide if you're interested in cash flow or appreciation, different property types, single family versus multifamily, weather, climate change, evaluating neighborhoods. You can look at some of these resources, niche.com, city-data.com, spotcrime.com, and others, and take a tour. And then for the pro forma, you just basically go line by line through the pro forma and just do a sanity check. It doesn't have to be exact. It's all a finger in the air kind of estimate anyway, but just make sure you're not getting ripped off. All right. Questions? Re-ask them. That's basically the thought process. It would be the same, very similar for a multifamily as well. All right, good deal. Already asked all of them. All right, well, thank you very much.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Has everyone signed in on the iPad? If you didn't get a chance, You may want to come up. How's it going? You may want to come up and put your information in there. We'll send you these reports and I don't know if Joe has anything that he wants to send to you. I'm sure he does, so we'll share your information with him as well. Does anyone have any questions? We meet here third Wednesday of every month, without fail in this room. Smoke or no smoke, fires or no fires. I don't know. So does anyone have any questions or ideas for speakers?
Actually,
or-
one for Joe. Who do you represent? What are they?
Oh, yeah.
You might as well do a commercial while you're here. Come on.
Well, this is supposed to be educational, no shameless self-promotion, nothing like that. So,
Okay, you did the education
Yeah,
part.
yeah.
Now.
okay, so the company is realwealthnetwork.com, and we invest in about 15 markets around the country. I had them in the earlier slide. About a third of them are in the Midwest, and they're mostly for cash flow. And then there's the others are in the Sun Belt. We're seeing a lot of growth in Charlotte, North Carolina, Atlanta, Dallas. All the Florida markets are going crazy. So that's where a lot of our investors are investing right now. We have single family homes, small multifamilies, short-term rentals like Airbnbs. They go from 500,000 to 800,000 in North Florida. They rent for like $250 a night, so you can get a lot of cash flow there. The due diligence process for short-term rentals is very different. You're basically in a hotel business at that point. So it's not just a real estate investment. You got to look at the regulatory climate. Suppose the city says we're not going to allow short-term rentals anymore. Now you have this $800,000 house. What are you going to do with it? What's your plan B? There's the projections for occupancy that this is going to be occupied 75% of the time. How do you know that's going to be the case? Seasonality is an issue. Some markets are steady throughout the year, like Florida. Other markets, their season, like ski season, is very busy, and then the rest of the year it's dead. So you got to make sure you don't close on the property right before the dead season, because you're going to go 4 or 5 months without any cash flow. You want to close right before the busy season and save up your money so you can, last. So due diligence for those kind of properties is very different. So we do all that, and we do a lot of analysis on stuff and make recommendations to our members accordingly. I forgot one website. Let me see if I can find it.
So you offer turnkey?
Yes.
Basically is what?
Mostly turnkey, but we used to do mostly turnkey, but now about 75% is all brand new construction. Because back in 2008, you could buy a house cheap enough, renovate it, and still have some margin. But our teams in the different cities, now prices have gone up. By the time they buy it, there's not much margin to renovate it to our standard and then make a profit. So some of our markets are dropping off. They're not, we used to be in Detroit. We're not there anymore. We're not, some other markets. How do you get back to, oh, here it is. Where's the cursor? Oh, here.
It's a touch screen too, so.
Yeah, here's a, all right, now how do I get rid of this? Yeah, here's the site, Redfin. It's got an interesting, I already populated it. So this is a migration site. They got all kinds of migration data, where people are moving from and where people are moving to. So I put Reno here. So, and I left this as all. So all the people who are migrating to Reno, where are they coming from? Well, we can probably guess. The Bay Area. Oops, what happened? Nope, messed it up. Well, let's do it. I'm gonna scroll all the way down. Reno. Oh. So you can see 45% of the people moving to Reno are coming from the Bay Area. LA is second, then Sacramento, Seattle, even Washington, DC. So you can see for any city, where are the people coming from and where they're going to. Or you could say if people are leaving Los Angeles, put LA here and put all here, and then you can see where are they going to. So you can see who's moving to Austin and who's moving to Arizona and who's moving to Boise. Sometimes this provides you some interesting insights about a market where the population is growing and you want to understand better why it's growing.
You said that's Redfin?
Yes, the URL's right there, redfin.com.
There we go.
news/data-center.
Yeah.
They have a whole lot of data, and this is just the migration section of their site. So I have a question for you guys. What did I miss? Are there any other resources that you guys use that I haven't thought of or didn't include?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Citizen,
What is it?
next door, the citizen,
What does next door do?
they basically have a message board that describes like neighborhood activity, so like reported content from that neighborhood, so you put in an address. And you get like how many concerned people are there about someone not mowing their grass.
Oh,
How many people have lost their cats.
It's like neighborhood watch.
neighborhood watch, that kind of, okay.
In the last 6 weeks,
And then what was the other one, Citizen?
citizen,
What does that tell you?
same kind of stuff.
Same kind of stuff. Okay, great.
So if you're like looking at something that you feel is this a C neighborhood or is this a B neighborhood? It can be really helpful in that.
Yeah,
And it tells you if there's sex offenders and felons, how many are near the house that you're looking at,
okay.
which is good to know too.
You get a free book.
Citizen kind of made news because they had cars, and I think it was LA. People were questioning what authority they had, because I guess they were acting as police.
Wow, okay. All right,
Do you use any cold call team or mailers consistently with your team, or do you use these resources more?
we have teams in each of the markets that we're in, and they do that sort of thing. They have to source the property. They work with wholesalers. They go to the auctions and source property that way. We don't do it.
Is it a third party or is it part of your company?
No, they're all separate companies. What we do is identify good markets that fit the criteria you mentioned earlier. Then we go out there, we try to build teams, find good property management companies, good turnkey providers, home builders. And then if they meet our standards, we invite them into the network on a trial basis. Let only our most experienced investors work with them first. And if we get positive feedback, then we launch them to the entire network. So every one of them is local. We don't control them or own them. We have a broker's license in California, but not in all these different states. So we're really not allowed to do much hands-on. All of our local teams do all the work. We could bring them qualified investors who have been screened, and we bring our investors qualified markets that meet our standards.
So are your investors all accredited?
No, not all of them. Some of them are just getting started. All right, well, thank you again.
Thanks, John.